Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Facebook. Happy Monday. Happy Monday, Lois.
Happy Monday, Jenice.
How are you?
Hello, all.
All right. So what were we talking about this week? We were talking about something interesting this week based on what we talked about last week about stories that we tell ourselves, right? And the stories that we build our lives around and that we operate around. And that kind of sparked a conversation between Lois and I in terms of judgments and where judgments come from and how that all gets started, right? And how we have perceptions of people based on what we hear about them or what we hear them say or what we see them do. And we have all these stories built up around them and perceptions around them and who they are, when that may not be who they are at all, right? So we want to talk a little bit about that today, about the perceptions. And I think it's going to be a big topic because I think that also lends to prejudices, it lends to biases, it lends to all kinds of newfangled things that we think about people when that's not necessarily who they are or who they tend to be, but we've already made them that way because of who we've seen in our mind's eye about who they are. So let's talk about that. That was a very interesting topic for us to kind of broach today. And so we want to talk about that. We want to talk about biases and prejudices and judgments and what impact does that have on us, on the people that we make judgments about, on the people that make judgments about us, and how does that affect us? Let's talk about that.
Well, we all have these things that cause us to judge other people. We all do it.
Yeah.
I do it. Don't tell.
Me too. I gotta admit.
Oh. I was telling Jenice this story about when I was in college, and there was a girl on my floor who loved horses. And when I found out that she loved horses, I immediately said in my mind, we will never be friends. Because of course she loved horses, and of course I could never be her friend. I'm not a big animal lover, and people who know me probably don't understand why, but I don't even know if I understand why, really. I don't love licking or hair, and it's probably more a texture thing than anything.
I find that really interesting because I love animals, and how we're friends, that's interesting, right? That you're not an animal person. And I think the same thing, you told me the story about your perception of me when you heard that I like cats and that I was living in New York, which I used to live in New York, don't anymore, haven't for many, many years. But you already had this perception of me, which I thought was really interesting, that we don't have anything in common. And it turns out we have a lot of parallels. How about that? Right? So that kind of speaks to judgments, and it kind of speaks to perceptions of people or the ideas that you have in your head about them before you really get to know them. And so we need to be really careful and mindful about that, because it can really set the stage for misunderstandings. It can set the stage for biases that really don't need to be there. It can set the stage for prejudices that are unfounded. It's just something to be aware of. Now, I'm not saying that we're all perfect and I don't do it or we don't do it. We all do it, including me. But we just need to be mindful of the fact that how that can color story, which is what we talked about last week, building stories or creating stories around who we are, around other people, around our conditions, around our illnesses, around our persona. We build stories around that. But if you have a wrong impression of someone, or if you have the wrong judgment about somebody, that can really set the stage for a total misunderstanding and breakdown in communication. And is that what we want right off the bat before we even get started? No, it kind of makes you kind of step back and think, we could color this whole picture a whole different way if we just take our time to get to understand and get to see what's really going on and get to listen maybe and just get to hear who the person is or what the story really is about or what was actually said as opposed to what you think you said or somebody said or what somebody told you they said or did. It just makes you realize that we really need to be careful about those prejudices that build up in ourselves that we create, because we create stories about ourselves, but we also create stories about other people. And is that a good thing? Not always necessarily so. So what do you think about that, Lois?
That's, I think maybe part of the problem is we've created such a story
Mm-hmm.
and we're not taking the time to sit down and listen.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really is difficult is we can only give someone else what we have to give. So, right, if we haven't sat down with ourselves
Uh-huh.
and done the work to hear ourselves, you know, to actually take the time and acknowledge what's going on with us,
Mm-hmm.
then we're not going to be able to sit down with someone else and acknowledge what's going on with them.
Wow. So
So,
first understanding who we are before we can understand somebody else. That's a good point.
yeah.
Good point. Good point. So
That,
what, not to cut you off, but just to say, sometimes it's difficult for people to be able to take an inward look at who they are.
mhm.
Sometimes it's a little bit scary. Sometimes it's misunderstood. We misunderstand ourselves. And if we don't understand who we are, then how is it going to be possible for us to understand somebody else, like you say? So sometimes it is scary, but sometimes that's what we need to do to be able to have a true communication and relationship with somebody. We need to be able to take an inward look at who we are as people, who we are as a person. How do we show up? How do we think we show up? Maybe we need to get that honest feedback and not what we want to hear, but what we need to hear from other folks, and maybe what we need to see in ourselves as opposed to what we want to just look at. That makes it even more real for us to be able to have that inward look and have some awareness of who we are, right? We don't always have an awareness, and sometimes we need to peel back the layers on ourselves first before we start looking at other people, because it can be really revealing about who we really are. So I think that's a very important point that you made. Very important. Very important. And I know that it's something that we need to all work on, probably, because I know that I have some preconceived ideas about certain kinds of people and who they are and what they do. And sometimes we'll also, like you did, shut down that, oh, we can never be friends, or that's not going to happen, or I'm not going to be able to have a conversation with that person, or they better not talk to me, kind of thing. So you build up these walls, you build up these resistances, you build up these conversations, and just being aware that we do that is important. Just being aware that we do that so that we can change that if we need to. And if we can change it to make it better, because I think communication is always important when you can communicate two ways as opposed to a one-way communication. Communication is much more effective when it's two ways. Both of you are communicating, or all of you are communicating, and both of you are being heard, and both of you are saying your piece, as opposed to one doing all the talking and one person doing all the listening. That's not really communication. That's really like a soliloquy, right? You're talking by yourself. So just being aware of that, I think, is important.
Yeah. What happened is that I did get to talk to the gal at college.
Yeah.
We sat in our dorm room and we had the two-way conversation, and we ended up becoming friends. And she ended up being that person that walked down the aisle in my wedding.
See, how about that?
So
How about that?
I went from "you're not going to be my friend" to "will you be in my wedding?"
How about that?
So, those things are not necessarily the best indicators. Maybe those are indicators of who's going to be the big people in your life.
Maybe the opposite of what you think is what, they always say the opposites attract too. So maybe there's something to that science, that what you think may not necessarily be, and what you think is best for you may not be the best for you, maybe the worst thing for you. So maybe there's some science to that. Maybe there's some truth to opposites, maybe the way to go. Who you think you would like, don't go for them. Go for the person that you don't think you go for them instead. There may be something to that, because I've heard lots of stories where people say that they're so different from their spouse, or they're so different from their best friend. They have some similarities, but they're so different in their personality makeup. It's just interesting how people come together, right? But I think also opposites are complementary too, though. I think you can actually complement somebody who's opposite than you, or you can learn too from people that are different from you. I like the learning aspect, and being open to learning differences of other people, I think, is important in communication. So that's a very good topic, very good point, I think, in terms of judgments. Just being aware that we do it. Because anybody that says that they don't judge, I don't think they're telling you the truth. Okay, we all do it. we all judge. We all have preconceived notions about people and who we think they are, until we get to know them. But then first, you have to be open to get to know them. You have to be open to have that conversation, to know that maybe, guess what? I was dead wrong about you. I'm glad I had this conversation, right?
Awesome.
And I'm glad that you're in my life, even though you didn't want to talk to me because I like cats.
It's the animals. It's the animals, man.
It's the animal thing. It's the animal thing. So yeah. So guys, if this resonates with you and you're honest with yourselves, and you know that sometimes we are judgmental and can be very judgmental, there's something to be aware of, and it's something to kind of examine in yourself about your judgments, and whether they're founded or not, or whether they have any real premise or not, and what you might need to do to open the communication with that other person, or your spouse, or your friend, or somebody that you're just meeting for the first time, on whether or not you can look in with it yourself and what your judgments may be, and be aware of that. So if that resonates with you, just give us a comment. Let us know about some stories that maybe you've actually experienced where that may have been the case, where you were dead wrong about somebody and found out that they turned out to be your best friend, or they turned out to be the person you married, or whatever, right? Just let us know some of your thoughts on this topic today. Great topic, Lois. Have a great Monday, everyone. Thank you for stopping by today. Monday
We'll talk
Musings.
soon.
We'll talk real soon next time. Bye for now.